Podcasting since 2005. This is the King of Podcasts radio network, kingofpodcasts.com.
Do you know in the UK, morning radio shows are called breakfast shows?
The King of Podcasts radio network proudly presents the Broadcasters Podcast. Here is the King of Podcasts.
I have a special guest interview here on the Broadcasters Podcast for this week, and I hope you'll really enjoy it. We're going to get into that in just a moment. My guest on the week is Neal Veglio. He runs Podknows Podcasting, and the service does a lot when it comes to production management, marketing, and coaching for businesses, focusing on transparent and effective podcasting strategies. But more importantly, he comes from the world of British radio, UK radio, which is very popular. Okay. Unlike where it is right now in the US, where it's very homogenized. I mean, there's homogenization over there, but the way they do radio over there is just still different, even today. And I may bring a whole lot of talk about that. His name is Neal Veglio, and we talk about the evolution of radio because he worked in breakfast shows and midday shows and all in the 90s, all the way into transitioning into podcasting earlier than I did, when we were still just live streaming, and we weren't necessarily recording these live streams yet. But that was one thing that started coming across. Also talked to a real radio legend there. That's what Neal did when he first started on, about if live streaming and podcasting will catch on. He brings up that story, and then also the change of podcasting in general, which, by the way, we talk more extensively about podcasting itself when it comes to transition from audio archiving to the big showbiz intros and the presentation process. That portion of the interview I have clipped out of this interview, and it's going to be in my Podcasters Row series because it's more intensive in that area. Initially, the interview was going to be more about for podcasting purposes, but the thing was, we got so into the weeds of it that I wanted to get into in the first place. It was a portion of the interview that we did. It went an hour, 10 minutes, or 15 minutes, I think. So there was a lot to cover there. But then the bulk of what we also talked about was everything when it comes to radio to podcasting, and that area I thought would fit really well on this program. So that's why I decided to do that. But there is a two-part. So as separate from everything else, you will get to hear Neal here on this program, and we go into the whole area of his transition from radio to podcasting and just go into the nuances of it. And then the Podcasters Row series, which will be coming out later in November. You'll be able to go and catch that episode on my Podcasters Row series, but all this content is at kingofpodcasts.com. Now, before I hit the interview, a couple of things that did come across that I thought would be important because it's a light news week. The Billboard charts continuing to go ahead and make changes right now with the recurring roles. No rap songs in the Billboard Hot 100 Top 40 for the first time since 1990. That's amazing. Now, what we had was, before, this particular thing happened, we did have Luther that hit number one for 13 weeks last year and now has fallen off the Hot 100 because of the recurrency rules. But now it's changed because of the fact that the highest ranking rap song was defined as a song deemed eligible for charting on Billboard's Hot Rap Songs listing that is able to get up to the chart. The highest ranking song right now is Young Boy Never Broke Again's Shot Callin' at number 44. Cardi B has Safe featuring Kehlani, and Big X the Plug's Hell at Night featuring Ella Langley also ranked in the 40s at 48 and 49. Those three songs are in the top 50, but nothing in the top 40 since 1990. Just think of the plethora of hip hop artists that have made their way across that barrier. And the fact that we don't even have any songs in the top 10, it's a telling sign about hip hop in general this year that it just has not done well. Ever since the whole Kendrick Lamar Drake feud of last year, which we covered pretty well, it's like everything died off. No one else is jumping into that space right now. That is concerning. And like I said, the last time we had no songs in the top 40 was February 2nd, 1990. The top ranking rap song was Biz Marquis's Just a Friend. It climbed up to number 41 on the chart. And then it would go to number 29. And then again, there has never been, in 35 years, 8 months, 3 weeks, there was at least one song in the top 40 for rap. And talk about for rap, in 1990, when that wasn't even a format yet. It wasn't even a standalone format. And let alone most urban contemporary stations, they didn't want to go ahead and play rap right away. Like, at 1990, you'd have stations that would basically be relegated to playing it at night. I mean, down here where I was at, 99 Jams, they would play it Friday and Saturday nights. And that was like after 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock. They didn't play it in the middle of the day because R&B was so prominent in the first place. But the second part was that change to go into rap. Even the fact that we had stations that, if it was pop or whatever, that if there was a song that had a rap verse in it, many pop stations wouldn't even play it. They would just go and cut it out. You had to have versions without rap, which is amazing, but that was the way that things were now. But here we are, 35 years later, and that happens. That's amazing. The other story I wanted to bring up, ASCAP, BMI, and SOCAN, the performance royalty organizations now, have defined a partially AI-generated musical work now is one that combines elements of AI-generated musical content with elements of human authorship. So they're updating policies to accept registrations of musical compositions partially generated using AI. And the works will now be registered directly within those individual societies. A couple of interesting stories to come off of that. All right. And that's all I wanted to go and bring up there. Now it's time to go and go to my interview with Neal Veglio. And stand by. I have a nice little introduction for all of you. So joining me right now on the program, I'm here with, let's say, King of Podcasts, meeting with the Pod Master. So my guest is a highly experienced audio content strategist and consultant, career spanning nearly 3 decades. He's the founder of Podknows Podcasting, focusing on creating strategic, results-driven podcasts, delivering measurable ROI for clients. His career goes back, we'll talk about that all, but again, over 30 years, like myself and media, and so much more. We're going to get into all that. He's also the host of the industry podcast, Podcasting Insights. He's an independent podcast awards judge and sponsor. I'm here with Neal Veglio. Neal, thanks for being on.
George, it's a pleasure. Thanks so much for inviting me on the show.
So before we got on here, we were talking about the fact that you in the UK have been on some kind of radio work, either on behind the scenes or on air since 1994. You hosted radio networks for the likes of Global Radio and Jack UK. So you worked at Capital FM. And that's a station that, I mean, for many years, I really did enjoy because of the fact that BBC Radio just had like a certain stance to themselves, dominant. And the one thing is, I always pay attention to what's going on in the UK because always when it comes to music and radio, the music pulse in London is so good because when it comes to EDM, when it comes to rock, when it comes to pop, when it comes to soul or rap, whatever it is, that there's a good diversity of music over there. And it's reflected on the official chart over there, which is the Billboard of the UK. And I follow the chart show there from BBC Radio 1, I mean, going back 10 years. Until they did a thing also where they, had it where I could listen to it on demand, and then they got rid of it because BBC just does things like that. They want to put everything behind a paywall. It's government owned, but no, we got to make you pay fees. We're going to make you pay this and that. And in the US, we got to find some workaround, a VPN to go listen to it, whatever it is. But Neal, you worked, in the area from radio into podcasting. So
funny you saying about Radio 1 and how you listen to the chart there. So my boss was Bruno Brooks, who in the 80s, the big top 40 DJ. He was the one. I mean,
yeah.
I just saw him he just showed up on TikTok the other day, actually, an old classic clip, him and Steve Wright hosting, as you say, BBC One's Top of the Pops.
I got the understanding because on YouTube, somebody's posted some of those Top of the Pop story ofs, and I've watched as many of them as possible from 76 to 90. I've seen them all.
Yeah.
They're great.
Absolutely. I mean, massive. People this is why
good talent.
Top of the Pops is featured in Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody movie because it was such an iconic show for making and breaking bands and talent. And, it was the one show that it didn't matter how big. I mean, Madonna, even if she was on a video feed, she would be on Top of the Pops.
She was on stage, actually. She was on stage.
Did once. Yeah, they really managed to get her.
But that was on stage. It was at the start of their career. It was great.
Yeah. It made her. And this is the thing. It was the one show that the pop stars absolutely would never turn down because they knew it would make or break them in the UK market, which they obviously wanted to do.
And they should have they should have brought it back. All the attempts, all the rumors they said, we might bring it back. They should. We need a show like that now. And by the way, for American listeners, American Bandstand is basically the same kind of idea as Top of the Pops, but Top of the Pops just took it to another level. Don't get me wrong, Dick Clark, an icon of mine, but the show was just so much different than what it was over there. Just saying like that.
But it was also really cringe, though. I mean, the fact that, they cover this in Bohemian Rhapsody, that Freddie Mercury got incensed because they said to him, no, we don't do live singing on this show. This is all mimed.
Oh, no,
this is all mimed. It's all mimed. So it's literally, they play the track off of, back then it would have been a vinyl record, obviously, but they played the track, the studio track recording would be played, and they would dance and mime to it. And there's a famous video of Rod Stewart and the Small Faces being on Top of the Pops, so annoyed that they weren't allowed to sing live that they play football in the middle of the performance. It's crazy. But it was still, even despite all this, it was an iconic show. And so, getting the opportunity to work with Bruno Brooks, obviously, I'm sure I don't need to tell you.
Who was a chart show presenter as well, by the way. Yeah, he was great.
Yeah, he was a Radio 1 Top 40 chart show presenter for 3 or 4 years. Mark Goodyear took over from him when he retired. Bruno, by his own admission, I used to have a lot of chats with him, actually, because you absorb these guys like a sponge when you get a chance to meet them. And, Bruno, interestingly, never really thought he was that great. That's the really interesting part of this, is that he thought he was an okay jock at best. And so that's why as soon as, he made his money and built his own business, he shrunk away from the limelight. He didn't want it anymore. He was just quite happy being the guy behind the scenes. So I worked with Bruno for the best part of 2 years. And the big learning moment I got from him, he always used to say to me, different, not dangerous. That was his motto. And that was kind of how he stayed in check with the regs. He never got any fines, all that sort of stuff. He was good at being inventive and creative, but without doing the Howard Stern thing and going over the line. He just was Mr. Friendly.
And I'll tell you, in your part, Neal, doing those morning shows, I can imagine. Was it always called the morning show? I always forgot there was always another way to call a morning show, but I forget what it's called now. Breakfast show. Yes, breakfast show.
Breakfast show. Oh, yes. That's what we call them here. Yeah, breakfast shows. Yeah.
Okay, I'll give you this other example. So I'm sure you had to speak with musicians on the air, and the way to get the best out of them, okay, there's a difference between what Ryan Seacrest does over here, where he's like talking about all this kumbaya, like, oh, in my music, I just feel like there's a certain attitude I have here, and my life, and my romance, and the breakups, and my depression. And shut up. You know who does a great job over there? And I missed him on the chart show now on BBC Radio, Scott Mills, who's on Radio 2 now. Yeah. He's great. He's entertaining. Him and his producer, they are funny. And the guy just got it. It was just he was blindfolded, hands behind his back. That guy could do a show. Yeah. Whatever it was. And he does the breakfast show over there on Radio 2. And I thought, every time I heard him do an interview, whether it was Billie Eilish or whoever else, or Ed Sheeran, he was like, okay, Ed Sheeran, let's talk soccer. And Billie Eilish talking about the music and talking about her brother and all that stuff. And just, he had a good way of like making fun with it, having like a little game with somebody and just made it feel at home. And I felt like I got the best of him. An early Tate McRae interview. I remember she was like kind of like the real, like almost like an emo type of feel to her in her early music, but like you just saw like something come out from her. And I'm like, okay, there's something more, some more personality. You're helping this girl out get noticed, and she's just getting her song out there. We don't really know about her except for one song. And then you're like, okay, here we go. But then if I hear Ryan Seacrest talking to Selena Gomez, oh my God, just shoot me, please. Horrible. And the Selena Gomez was funny because I heard her on Ryan Seacrest and I heard her on Scott Mills, and Scott Mills just did 10 times better because understanding your guest, knowing how to go and get something out of them so that you're not just getting the same old interview like everybody else is getting.
Well, I'm going to say something very controversial here about Ryan Seacrest, because the point is that what a lot of people don't realize is that, people say, well, Ryan Seacrest, he started in Radio 2. Yes. But what a lot of people don't realize is that before American Idol, Ryan Seacrest hosted the worst show in his market, and he was about to be fired. If he hadn't got American Idol, Ryan Seacrest would not have worked in radio much longer, believe me on that. And so now, ironically, Ryan Seacrest is benefiting from his American Idol fame that literally boosts his radio profile. What you're talking about with Scott Mills, there's a reason. Scott Mills started in radio,
Yes.
but he started well. He did good shows.
Yes.
And so I've seen this more recently. This is kind of why I walked away from radio, to be honest, because I was seeing it emerging as a more frequent thing where instead of having radio experienced people that had to prove their ability to build an audience from scratch, they started going, well, no, we want people with lots of followers. So they started looking at social media. And now they look at YouTube and TikTok. Now you can have a radio show from being on a reality show and gaining, 1 million followers on TikTok. It's just, and then they wonder why these people have guests come in and they don't have an ability to interview them because they don't know what an interview is. As far as they're concerned, they're just so used to getting likes and the comments in their TikTok feed. They think, oh, that's all I need to do is just talk about myself. And so, that's a fundamental problem with, Ryan Seacrest for me represents
he's horrible.
Probably the first big
horrible talent,
fame.
Incredible businessman, exquisite guy. He learned from Dick Clark. He basically took the Dick Clark playbook. Kardashians is his bread and butter. I don't know why he's doing well a fortune, but listen, I'll give him all the credit in the world. I respect the man because he does make money. He is a cash cow on the business side, no doubt about it. But a horrible talent.
And this is the thing. Some people are, I'll put myself in this category as well. I was a good radio jock, right? I'll say that. I was good. I wasn't exceptional. I wasn't outstanding. Right. There's a reason that you've heard of Howard Stern and Scott Mills, but you haven't heard of Neal Veglio's radio career because it was literally just I was the guy that they would pay to go in, look after a show for a week, a month. I did have a regular morning show and I did well and I built audiences. I didn't suck, but I wasn't exceptional. I wasn't a generational talent.
Don't push yourself like that because journeyman in radio is a treasure. Listen, Harry Nelson back in the day in the 70s. I think of Ron O'Brien back in the day in the 70s. I think of Charlie Van Dyke in the 70s and 80s. We had great radio jocks that were journeymen. Oh, can you go take care of somebody at this vacation spot? We're going to be gone for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Beaver Cleaver was another guy, was a great guy, and I forget his real name. Ken something or other. But either which way, we had people that were okay, they would go into a different market. It could be in New York, LA, San Diego, whatever, Miami. And they'd come in for vacation. We'd be a journeyman, fill in the spot, and they would fill in it, and you'd feel like nothing was wrong. It was okay, everything's competent. You're going to be able to go and do this, and you can jump right in immediately and, get the vibe of the audience and get callers to call in, whatever it was. So don't take away all that from there.
No, I'm not taking it away. But what I'm saying is that, even at my best, when I was doing, my probably my longest morning show was probably about 3 years. And even at my best doing that, and trust me, I went from, fourth in the market to first within a very short amount of time. So, I knew what I was doing. But what I would say, in all honesty, is that as good as I was on the radio, I am a much better producer. I'm a much better creator. Yeah. I'm a much better ideas man and strategist to make other people sound good. And so that's kind of what I've leaned into, I think, is all the things that I learned to do as a job. I've got the benefit now of not only having done them myself so I know they work, but also that extra sort of layer of I can make you do this. I can lead you and I can coach you to do this. And I think that's the thing that people like Ryan Seacrest are probably best at in terms of I can identify the other guy who's the talent, tell him what to do or tell her what to do. Like you say, the Kardashians, he's great at setting up these stories where the Kardashians are in chaos. Brilliant at that. He just can't do it himself. No. And that's valid. And there are many of us that are like that as well. Like you mentioned, Bruno's the same.
But how many people do we know that are in podcasting now that are hosts that they are their own producers? They're their own people behind the scenes. They're doing all the work themselves. They're very competent at it. I think that's the one thing too, is that the credibility, just the level of talent that you need to do a podcast. You don't have to be like you need to be for television or for radio for a national audience like that. It just, in that intimate setting, same thing goes for these people that that have followers either on TikTok or Instagram or whatever else. I think that's the other thing too, is that there's a relatability to people. And the thing is that if you are competent enough to go and make sure that everything is running smoothly, because, in podcasting, we don't need a whole lot of people. We don't need somebody handling the phones. We don't need somebody that's handling, producing for whatever kind of skit or segments coming up next. None of that stuff.
I would argue that actually works in your favor. If you are lower profile in podcasting, I would argue that makes you better.
Yeah.
You know, why do so many celebrity shows fail? It's because they come in expecting the podcast audience to shift to what they need them to be. But no, podcast audiences were here before you, buddy. You know what I mean? You've got to start entertaining them where they want to be met. And this is the problem with celebrities. They come in going, well, I had a TV show, or I'm a famous movie star, or I'm a ex-radio guy from the 80s, or whatever it is that they do. They come in and they want the audience to be receptive to that. But actually, the joy of podcasting is the curiosity. It's the humility. It's the understanding, and it's the relatability. And this is something that a lot, like celebrities, can't possibly achieve that. They just can't. And I mean, Taylor Swift is a perfect example of this. What happened? She goes on the first ever podcast she goes on, tanks her career. She's got haters now. How did that happen? How did she go from being beloved to being cancelled in less than a month? Because she went on a podcast and didn't know how to talk to the audience.
Well, but also the thing was, there's a lot of animosity and vitriol because of the fact that, oh, look, she's on there with her boyfriend, now her fiance, and all this. Oh, I got to do an album. I mean,
No, she's thinking
beat promotional machine. It's like, yeah, but it's like, you know, I don't even know anybody that really listens to any celebrity podcast. The ones that are like all listed up on the Apple Podcast Top 100, whatever it is. I mean, I can't tell you of any of those that are out there that have either actors or somebody else is like, you know, some form of late night show host, whatever it is. I don't listen to any of those shows. And
no, many people don't.
That fun, and the clips are not even that good. But
no,
these people are getting paid a lot. They're going to be on there for whatever reason. It's the whole thing after COVID. That's what also did help out, was that when all these people were kind of like out of work and it's like, oh, they're stuck at home, then what are they going to do? Then they all kind of like stuck around and did this kind of work. So it's like you have a couple of these shows that are out there. I don't know, man. I mean, for one thing is you're also guest intensive. I want to get into that part because every podcaster, for the most part, wants to be guest intensive. Even from what I do now, the Podcasters Road Series or Broadcasters Podcast, you know, Broadcasters Podcast, I first started doing, it was a lot of guest interviews. And I was like, I'm going to go monologue now. And I changed the approach of the show. But like all my stuff is almost always monologue. And if I have guests, it's like I got a plethora coming in, but I'm also taking who I get. Like I don't need to go get some list of who I need to go bring on. It's whoever comes in, inbound, I will talk to them. And I'll make a great interview out of them. I've done over 1,000. So like I know what I'm doing on this part. And I think that's the part where if you're a good podcaster, you know how to go and do both.
Absolutely. And it's not just about knowing how to do it. It's about being willing to do it. That's the thing. And a lot of these celebrities, they're just not willing to do the whole sitting back and letting their guest be the star. I mean,
you have to let one producer be involved and have to like help put them up. No, stop.
Dax Shepard is really good at this, actually. You know, a lot of people give Dax a lot of grief about the way that he does his show because he's got this whole weird dynamic with the producer and, you know, are they swingers and where's Kristen? How does she feel about all this? But that aside, if you take that out of the equation, what he's done is he's built a really cool, safe space for celebrities to come in and know that they're going to get treated with respect and that he's going to do a very, like Joe Rogan does, a very curious podcast interview. Yeah. And, you know, so many don't, you know, people give Joe a load of grief as well, but all he's doing is he's deep diving. He's coming with curiosity. And a lot of these celebrities, they just don't know how to do that because they think they're the star and they haven't figured out, actually, podcasting is not about you. Why do you think Mark Maron's had so much success? Because Mark Maron will tell his story. He'll do his 10-minute opener out the gate. Yeah. Then he brings his guest in, and then he STFUs, and he lets the guest own the spotlight. That's literally what he does. And he knows that his job is to get the stories that nobody else has heard anywhere else. And that's what these celebrities need to learn to do if they're going to stick around. But let's be honest.
I can't listen to every program either. Because like for Joe Rogan, it's like, give me a name I'm hearing as like, I want to really have to listen. Like the last one I recently listened to of Joe Rogan, I absolutely wanted to hear was Lionel Richie. I was like, oh, that was a gold mine of an interview because that was great. Because every clip I kept seeing was like, oh, there's just funny stuff in here. Great stuff. And Lionel Richie's just a wealth of knowledge and wisdom, man. Yeah. So that was good. But it's like, with Dax Shepard, I can't listen to, by the way, because he butchered a movie called Chips, which was a recreation of a TV show from the 80s. And it was a good childhood, favorite of mine. Yeah. And he butchered the hell out of that movie. So it
wasn't good.
So tanked. But again, a lot of comedies at that time were really bad. Now, that was the part too. So I don't want to always go guest intensive because I think, to keep that up, then you're also making your show selective, your episode selective. But then again, it's like, I don't know, there's also a way where even when I do monologues for shows, I got one show that I do that I'll have basically like a rotation. I don't know if you ever watched the Maury Povich show over there in the UK. Have you heard of it?
Yeah, we got Maury. Yeah.
So, he's got the same, like the four trenches of like what he does. You are not the father, the lie detector test. I can do what I want. He's got his 4 things. And I've kind of learned in a monologue, that's kind of like what I want to do based on the metric that I have, that I might talk about one subject, another subject, and just rotate them all in like a month.
Yeah.
But for you, when you're doing your own content, okay, so from Podcasting Insights, I mean, what is it that you do that you think would be important to keep people to go and keep listening the next time around and next time around, to keep it infectious, to keep it where you want to binge listen?
I think, funnily enough, my most recent episode really leans into this, actually. I did an episode, that I released on Friday where I talked about how I just realized for the last 2 years, my podcast has been absolutely wrong. Everything I've been doing with the podcast has been wrong. It's been the wrong material. It's been for the wrong audience. And so I literally went through the process of sharing my mindset on it, saying, do you know what? I don't know who should be listening to this show right now, because I've obviously been putting out these insights around podcasting, which in my view were for people that want to do a podcast for their business, because that's kind of what I'm known for. Right. But also, the material kind of lends itself to hobbyists as well. And so my goal is not to get hobbyists listening, because let's be honest and frank about it, they're not my clients. Right. Hobbyists are not going to be paying me to consult with me to help them do their shows. So I actually ended up probably producing one of my best ever episodes off the back of that, because I was being honest and saying, look, I screwed this up. I'm the strategist and I got my strategy wrong. So now I've got to go back to the drawing board and figure out, number one, who's this show meant to be for? And number two, what kind of content do I need to make for this show so that you will be engaged and keep coming back every week? Right. And I think that's kind of the point with it, is that, my intention has always been to share my wealth of experience from, as you say, 25 years. Pretty much that I've been doing this. Yes. What's the point of me doing it unless I'm able to share the good and the bad? We're not here to sugarcoat the experience here. People make mistakes all the time, and they go into a shame spiral because, oh my God, you mean I booked the wrong RSS company, or I bought the wrong microphone, or I didn't plan my opening enough, or, I got the wrong guests. They're going through this on an almost weekly basis. So if we, as these leaders, as we like to call ourselves, can say, do you know what? We make mistakes too. We're not perfect. We're learning as we're going. Nobody's got all the answers here. I think that creates that space then where podcasters, who are our ideal audiences for these sorts of shows, are able to go, well, if they're getting it wrong, then it's okay that I get it wrong as well.
Yeah. I also like that idea of being humble and just realizing, you're not the end all be all, the most perfect person on podcasting. So
nobody is.
Humanizing yourself is a great idea. I think also doing it without breaking the fourth wall, but that's another pet peeve of mine. I want to go into another area about when it comes to radio itself. So, I mean, we were talking before we got on, and there's the homogenization of radio. So like radio's not doing any favors right now. So yeah, you have different morning shows that are, a couple of different same morning shows that all these stations are going to have. Not much variety to it. They're all the madcap, woohoo, morning zoo type of feel to it that there was. Or they're just way too old to be doing it anymore, and it doesn't fit any more of a narrative. And, it's like, it's just antiquated. Stories they might talk about, gossip they might talk about, it's very saccharine and it's just watered down. It's horrible. Yeah. And, it's like, well, also the fact is that you're still on the plane of the fact that radio still has to play certain rules when it comes to language, when it comes to content, and what you're not allowed to do. But I still think there's a room for radio, and this is just going in the broadcaster sense, that radio needs to find a thing. And I think in the UK, the UK's done a better job of evolving and transitioning into it. Because at least your music radio stations have not lost the point. You still have live jocks. I think that's something that could be done here in America. And I know there have been stations that will at least one company, Odyssey, this over here, that tried to go do something like that, where they were trying to do, they would have certain time slots with the same host on all stations. So for the pop stations, they had the same person doing that, and it didn't work for them. But it's like, I think you could do something where if you wanted to have a national format, one station does everything with some local hosts embedded in local time slots, you could still do that here. But for whatever reason, they don't think they can do that now. It's like iHeartRadio could be doing something like that. Listen, you want to go and cut down the amount of staffing and the amount of manpower you have in there, because your private equity company wants to continue to keep picking away at the resources that you have, fine. And you're building out your podcasting level. That's great, Bob Pittman. Thank you so much. And it's not his fault. I keep saying that now because I used to blame it on him all the time, but it's not his fault. iHeartRadio just has a problem where they just want to keep picking away at what the traditional format was because they're holding all this debt. And they never did anything with that debt. They're just allowed to go and have it. Unless they go through, bankruptcy like they did. And even then, didn't make them any better, didn't make them any smarter. But you could create a local voice in a national format. Do you believe that or no? Do you think that we're done in the UK or no?
They don't believe that in the UK because all the local guys, they got rid of them and made every radio station in the UK national now. We don't really have, apart from maybe 3 or 4 independents here and there. I worked for one of the few remaining independents in the Jack FM, because although the Jack FM brand is quite renowned in the US and across Canada, of course, in the UK, it wasn't taken up as much as it was in those markets. So we had maybe 3 we had 5 and it gradually whittled down to 3, then it was 2, and then it was 1. And so the Oxford one was the last remaining one. Even they couldn't survive with their whole, franchise turnkey radio run cheaply format. They couldn't keep it going. Bauer Media is the company that came in and they bought all the remaining local radio stations. And now you don't have local jocks. You just don't. You don't even have, local regional mid-morning shows or local regional morning shows. It's literally all national. And this is where I think they missed the trick, because their answer to this, to streamline the money and, the expenses and make sure that they could keep pumping out radio, they've actually ignored podcasting. And I think this was the win they could have had. Instead of getting rid of all the locals, making them redundant and then relying on just having big national names on their stations, but not thinking about, where's the next wave of talent coming from? They just went, we'll just pick them from TikTok or YouTube, which is the wrong place to find them. And so for me, I don't understand why these big companies like iHeartMedia, Global, Bauer don't just sort of say, we need to get local podcasting teams set up so that these guys can start plying their trade, learning on the ground and creating us content that makes us stand out locally. They've ignored it all. And that for me is where you say the UK still is doing it all right. I don't know. I disagree on that. I think if anything, the UK is probably worse off than the US now in terms of that whole keeping radio alive and vibrant, because it's 95% voice tracked, and frankly, it sounds terrible. You got traffic jams being reported 60 miles away in most territories. Do you know what I mean?
Right, but I still think so like for BBC Radio 1, I know they get I believe it's still 5-6 million listeners out of that whole area of 65 million, people in the country. But the one thing is, every time I listen on there, whatever time of the day, when they are talking to people, whether it's through the WhatsApp or they're taking phone calls, whatever it is, or recording calls, is that you're calling out different cities around the country. And it's like, okay, this person's doing this person's chiming in saying that they're on the M1 or whatever highway, they're on some traffic or whatever. It's like there's a local kind of feel to it, because I guess the UK, England itself, kind of has that feel where people just are not that far away from each other. It's not like it's so diverse where it almost feels like it doesn't feel as diverse as the United States does.
It would be lovely if those emails and those calls that they were taking were real.
But it works for. I'm buying into it. It sounds like it's working and all, but
completely made up. That is the thing. The Radio 1's producer back in the day, Radio 1 producer job was picking the records with the DJ, making sure their records were queued up for them at the right times, and taking calls. Now the Radio 1 producer's role is basically to be a voice that certain jocks can have chiming in now and again. They're doing the admin stuff. They're making sure that if they do have guests in the studio, the guests they're essentially PAs. That's what producers are now. They don't have any really creative, productive roles. And it's certainly not, taking calls in. What they are doing is they're making up the emails. They're making up the calls. They're maybe going through the Rolodex of happy to be called fake callers.
Or using AI probably to go and generate the whole message.
AI voices now. Absolutely. That's what it is. So, don't give Radio 1 too much credit, because Radio 1's still a big organization that gets his money for free from the license fee payer.
But they still spend money on imaging. They still spend money on, at least you can tell that they're producing and they're bringing in the real talent in. I just want a taste of that, because iHeartRadio or Odyssey or wherever else we got here, they don't do anything like that here. They're not even doing like a tenth of what they're doing over there. If we'd even had that, I think I would feel a little bit better about the radio, but we don't have anything like that at all, because you can tell over here, everything is voice tracked. No one's on a live microphone anymore.
It is here. It is here as well. It's just that it's done
better
in such a clever way. Because they use software now. They use RCS Zeta, which has dynamic timing. So in other words, when the jock goes to record their voice tracks, doesn't matter how long the song is, it will automatically use AI to shrink or lengthen the song by adding extra hooks, by reducing hooks, whatever it needs to do, to make sure that song fits the talk break across every single station, across every region. That's how it's done. It's clever technology, but it's taken the soul out of it. It really has.
Well, we used to, no, and iHeartRadio, though, we had the talk box, where you used to go ahead and they would take like a particular talk show or chat show, and they would speed it up like an extra 2-3%, so they get an extra 30 seconds or 60 seconds of commercials. The stupid talk box, and you'd see the person in the control room. Okay, the show starts at 6 after. Hit the switch, and here we go. You're just going super fast, and I'm hearing Rush Limbaugh going at like 50 miles an hour. Like, no, come on. And that was he only did that for a little while. Of course,
oldest trick in the book.
Concepts that and less is more. These people, man.
Tell you. Oh no, we triggered you.
It's almost like that trauma that you get like after coming back from war, post-traumatic.
PTSD, absolutely.
Now, there's one part I wanted definitely to ask you, because you've been talking about this quite a bit, is that now in podcasting, there's more of the issue of making a program more hyperlocal. So now there's a recent update for RSS feeds where there's a podcast :location tag supporting a rel attribute to distinguish between use cases. So the location the podcast episode is about, and a location where the podcast or episode was recorded or produced. So now you can use the location tag in RSS feeds. And that was something that you made mention of that could be a real game changer right now, that technically traditional broadcasters have been cutting local programming for years to make a relocalizing pivot. Does that make it now for podcasters something that will be happening? We see geographical podcasting someday. Is that coming up?
I really hope so. I genuinely, because I think this is where the future entertainment is going to come from in terms of, why did people love their local radio guys, in the 80s and 90s? Is because they knew that they'd listen to them every day on the radio. They'd go to the local shopping mall and they'd bump into them and they'd be signing autographs for people. And you felt like you knew the person was talking to you every morning because you'd bump into them. They were like you. Oh, yeah. They went shopping in the same places as you. They went drinking in the same bars as you. They had dinner with their family in the same restaurants as you. And that's something that's now missing, I think, from radio. Podcasting gives people an opportunity to sort of bring that back. I mean, the idea of listening to, where I live, near Oxford, the idea of being able to listen to an Oxford podcast hosted by a person that I could technically go to the Westgate shopping centre in Oxford and bump into the person. It's that whole thing that we've been missing, that whole, the relatability and the connection that's been missing. And I think there's a trick being missed here by companies where, you could very easily set up a local network of podcasts on various different topics and have it, like you've done, have a network of shows, 2 special interest groups, and it costs you nowhere near the amount of money that would cost to run a local radio network, but the results would just be phenomenal. And I just don't understand why people aren't already getting excited about this. I certainly am. I personally predict this is going to become the future of podcasting.
You know, it's funny. You make fun about locals, and I think about there's one point where I was listening to one radio station, the classic rock station here. This guy Ken Dashow, a great guy in New York, does it really. They've been around for a long time. I remember him mispronouncing a city here. It's Pompano Beach. He called it Pompano. I was like, okay. And then the other street over there, Copans Road. He called it Copans Road. And I already knew. Okay, voice tracker, dude. Please learn the language of the neighborhood you're going to talk for. If you're going to act like a local, talk like a local, try to act like something like that.
Yeah.
It's funny where that comes from. But I think where you're already seeing that localization now is, I think TikTok's doing a great job of that. Their algorithm now, if you notice in the last 2 years, they definitely now target more into your For You page of local content. So like,
getting a lot better. Yeah.
They're getting you as like, oh yeah, you got me. And I'm seeing videos I wouldn't normally see. I'm like, now I mean, followers to it, but like, because they are geo-targeting. The other thing too is that also the same thing for advertising. They want to be able to get into that route too. And I mean, how far away are we from getting there? Because the thing is, I think this is the direction that people want to go to, is to have it where we are geo-targeting a lot of things, if that's what you want. But it's taking a while to get to that point. And also then, if you get geo-targeted, how to make yourself popular within your market.
Well, I mean, that comes down to your ability to market yourself, doesn't it, really? Which some people can do and some people can't do. Yeah. I think, but for me, I think the point is that the opportunity there, if you can figure out how to get people that in the area that you're targeting to, and, you know, Facebook ads might come into this, Google ads might come into this. Obviously, you got podcast platforms where you can advertise. We haven't quite, got it down to to quite... the modular granular level of, okay, so these people that are listing in these specific areas yet, but it's coming. I'm pretty confident that it's coming. Ad tech's getting better all the time. I just think the opportunity there to be able to literally target those people, like you say, like TikTok are doing. I personally think TikTok is the future of local radio, honestly. I think that, where we used to have jocks making comedy bits, song parodies, things like that. I mean, you already see it on TikTok now. Oh, yeah. I Ruined It, which is a great meme where somebody takes well-known songs, takes the vocal track from it and sticks it the voice processing and auto-tunes it to a completely different record. And there I ruined it, so you got Enter Sandman from Metallica with Britney Spears playing over the top of it. And that sort of stuff is what we were doing in radio back in the day. And now it's on TikTok. And it's, I think that's what it is. But I think we have to be understanding and accepting of the fact that things have changed. Our traditional broadcasting is on borrowed time. That's not just radio, that's TV as well. Streaming is killing, live TV. The amount of cable cutters, cord cutters, as they call them, is on the rise. I think that's the thing, is we have to basically be aware that radio's done. So now it's about podcasting, TikTok, and creating content that you can reach your audience with in a different way, and maybe letting go of the ego a little bit as well, and understanding that you've got to create the content that people are looking for, that you're just not going to work. It's not going to work.
Yeah. I don't want to give up on radio. I really don't, because it's still my livelihood, and I just have so much great memories for it. And it's what I've always wanted to do, stay in my business. If I could have, if I didn't have podcasting do as well as it did, I would have wanted to stay in radio, even though it wouldn't have paid well, and I would have all these other things. But, on the sense of radio, they have figured out the advertising side for being hyper local. So the programmatics have gotten smart about that. They're good about that part. While radio's not going to be able to go and stay hyper trending, because that's where we are in a day of hyper trends where things come up so quickly. As we are right now, TikTok has the group 7 trend. So you've watched 7 videos of the same person of content to finally get to that. So now you're in group 7. That's the new thing here. But the thing is with radio, I think it just still needs it's that there's certain traditional outlets of media that do not need to be part of the hyper trend. They can't keep up with the hyper trend of like, okay, something's viral for like a week and then the next thing's next. So, I mean, even for me doing podcasting now, if there's a trend that comes up, whether it's in culture, it's in social, whatever, to keep up with it, I try to get there ahead as soon as I can. But like, if I'm looking for a publication that's writing about it, or putting something out about it, or a radio show or a video about it, it's going to take time, because some people have time to go and produce the content. To get to that hyper-local trend or that hyper trend so quickly is going to take time. But I think that's the other part where you also got to figure out which lane you want to be in. Do you want to be in that busy express lane of like hyper trends and like stay on top of things and try to be as timely as possible? Or do you want to just go into the route where like you can go ahead and glom over it, but it's like you stay in a lane of, that for radio, I think for music, we have streaming that's like, okay, here's all these new songs that are popping up, thousands of songs a day that are popping up on Spotify or Apple or whatever it was. But like somebody has to come in and like out of the day, you got to have somebody that's going to be critical and say, you know what? We're the tastemakers again. We're going to be the ones that hear, there's the music coming out. And these are songs you should absolutely hear because it's somebody that is going to concerts. Somebody is that's wise to the game, which was what radio was. Freeform radio or even pirate radio that was off the coast of England back in the 60s and 70s. You had those stations, that they would understand, okay, they knew what songs, what was coming up, what was the trends that were coming in. And it wasn't going to be something that was going to be a fly-by-night. It was going to be something that was going to be lingering. It was going to stay around. It was going to be consistent. We need that part where people are actually following trends and actually can give an idea of what something is that's a longer trend versus the hyper trends. And I think that's one thing where podcasting can be in that place in either both, but then traditional media needs to stay in the lane of being the bigger, wider worldview.
Yeah, I mean, talking about tastemaking, I mean, that is what TikTok is doing now, really, isn't it? I mean, it's picking the trending music. So obviously podcasting can't touch music. There are licensing laws that make that next to impossible to do. But that doesn't mean there can't be some sort of like alignment to it using TikTok. And it's really interesting because there was actually talk of a TikTok radio station at one point that was going to be branded and was actually going to lean into podcasting in terms of getting the talent from TikTok that were doing podcasts and bringing that music part into it. But again, it didn't happen and I think the reason for that is it's because the radio bosses, they just don't have that vision. They're not able to get out of their own way and see the future and understand that actually, if we're going to really take these guys on and really do this.
We're doing right now on radio, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
Okay, so for every artist that might be on TikTok performing, or somebody that's out there and has a song on Spotify, we don't have many live performances anymore.
Right.
Nobody's live performing, no in-person interviews of these new artists that get to know who they are. Like we don't get to see these people, in their craft live, acoustic, maybe unplugged. We don't get to see them and get to hear who they are, and not behind some kind of feed or whatever. Radio or even television could be, and newspapers could be doing that now. Could actually say, okay, let's go and bring that to the forefront. I mean, we don't have that many places to do that. I mean, public radio does a little bit here on a couple of stations, but for the most part, they also have their own taste of music. They should actually find tastemakers that are actually going to be understanding a mainstream view, what music is on the cusp of crossing over. We don't have anybody doing that. The crossover was the most important thing I was talking about in my Broadcasters podcast. I talk about all the time. We don't have a crossover anymore where, okay, something that bubbles under from TikTok or Instagram or whatever else that might be trending and is coming viral. Okay, somebody takes it and crosses it over to become mainstream. So Top of the Pop's a great example. If you had punk music in the 70s, it was bubbling under and people were hearing about it. And all of a sudden, okay, let's bring on Sex Pistols. Let's bring on, the adverts or whatever it is, like, okay, good. Then you're kind of bringing, okay, now people can get to hear it and it's a larger audience that picks up on it. And the music companies, the record companies will obviously more money on it. Radio will get more airplay and get more audiences listening to them. I think that's been missing right now. I don't know why that is, but do you see the same thing like I do?
I do. I know exactly where you're coming from. And I think it's one of those things that the fact that they're not doing that is one of the greatest, causes of frustration. But again, whenever you're dealing with legacy media, that is the problem. There was a reason why they wanted to stamp out pirate radio back in the 60s and 70s, because it represented something new that would mean they'd have to change the way things were always done. And we know if there's anything that the broadcast industry does not like, it's change, whether that's in terms of the medium, whether that's in terms of the measurement. I mean, they still haven't fully figured out audience measurement in radio now. And I was starting to think in the early 2000s, when I'd been in radio for, nearly 10 years, by the time I'm, retiring, they'll have figured this out. They haven't. And the PPM metering thing didn't figure it out either. It's flawed technology. So I think the thing with it is that, for me, if you want to make change within, you have to make change within, because nobody's ever going to give you the permission slip to do it. And that's why I've gone into podcasting, because for me, it's, all the things that radio represented as frustrations for me, I was able to circumvent those by just going, well, I don't need you anymore. I've got podcasting now, and I can go direct consumer. I don't need to go through an FM transmitter to get the same things achieved that I will be able to get done through an RSS feed. And it's just, the whole thing about, the radio's everywhere. You just turn that on in your car and it's there. It's like, yeah, but now in 2025, 2026, most people now know what a podcast is and how they can get one. So really, it's about get out of your own way and understand that if you want to build, if you want a future, you've got to embrace new and just stop moaning about the fact things have changed.
And I think to close it out, the fact is that creativity is crippled by anything corporate. It just does.
Absolutely.
It will absolutely take it unless you keep fighting in there and keep getting a good fight. You can keep trying to go and do that, and hopefully it changes. But now podcasting, social media, internet, all the creativity's there. So, and I think what really the problem is that with these corporations, anybody that was creative or actually had a good mind in there that could still buckle with the brass and say, okay, we're going to keep trying to make this work. And it could still shine through, even through the adversity. That's all gone because they made sure that all those people could never get themselves back in. So anybody that's creative, they don't want to be in radio because they know the corporations that are in there, it's such a toxic environment. You just can't. It's a great, if you could have the access, it will be great, but you're not going to get to do what you want.
No, there's always somebody that is somebody else's boss that has to be answered to. And that's always going to be the problem with it, unfortunately. Yeah.
Now, finally, in the work that you're doing, I haven't had a lot of time to get talking about all the things you've been doing when it comes to Podknows Podcasting. So as you're doing that, and let's go into just some of the work you're doing itself. So real quickly, take people into Podknows Podcasting and just let's go ahead and talk about the fact that website is podknows.co.uk, podknows.co.uk, offering podcast production, management, marketing, and coaching for small businesses and corporates. Tell people really quick about the full podcast marketing solutions. Take a minute for the audience and let them know what you're doing.
Yeah, so the whole point of it really is to take, if a brand, if a solopreneur, if a small business, or even a corporate wants to, leverage podcasting, if they've not been really looking at it too hard, or maybe they've tried in the past and it didn't work out and they want to know how they can do it maybe slightly better, that's what we do is we literally take them, we handhold them, we go through the ideation strategy, we try and steer them away from what is the typical idea of, well, let's get our CEO answering questions about what we do, which nobody wants to listen to. So we're really, our role is to sort of say to them, look, if you want to edutain, you need to remember the tain part of this and actually make that a big part of what you're doing, because, educating people is one thing, but people need to know they want to be educated in the first place. Unless you've got the tainment part figured out, then you're not going to get the opportunity to edutain full stop. So it's really about helping them understand that what they're doing could be exciting and engaging and not just a sales tool, essentially, a marketing tool. It needs to be something that sells itself. And so that's what we do. And we produce content that gets ears, essentially.
Right. Now, as opposed to those companies that might be looking into the podcast idea as a marketing tactic, but then they get PR companies that'll come in and say, oh, we could just get you interviews on other podcasts and we could do some of the things for you, put some press releases out, get you some paid earned media, and we'll take a little commission off of that. There are those that I know in my business of, especially in the cannabis industry, that if we want to get anybody out there to work with us on a podcasting effort, all these PR companies have come into this space, found their way in 10 years ago, and they said, well, we're going to just go and try to pick up and go on the cheap with all these companies that get their marketing done without them having to go and have a marketing director and have a purse strings. They want to make sure to control those purse strings. Now, how do you go and counteract people that are, that's kind of your competition? How do you counteract that kind of competition to try to get people to go ahead and buy into what you're doing?
Marketing. That's really it. It's about telling people how nonsense those agencies are. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are some PR companies that do a good job, but most of the time, these people, what they're doing is they're doing cold outreach. They're doing it badly. they're burning their brands straight away. By the time it even gets into your inbox, they've already destroyed what they were trying to achieve, which was trying to get interest in what they offer. I think people are getting wise to these PR companies now, and certainly in podcasting. I mean, it's pretty much a guaranteed. If you launch a podcast, these people are trailing through RSS feeds looking for contact emails, and you're going to get an email from these people within about 2 episodes anyway. I think it's really, for me, the whole thing is about just being honest and transparent and telling people, look, these are the alternatives that exist out there. Here's why you might want to consider this option. Here's why you might want to consider that option. But if you're looking for this outcome, then you definitely want to do this with us or anybody else. I think the more you can, the more you can educate the end user on what's in it for them, then you haven't really got competition, because competition's neutralized straight away when you explain to people, yeah, that's not going to help you. It might get you on, a little badge to put on your website, as featured in Forbes. But beyond that ego trip that you're going to get from your website, maybe networking events, you can go and brag, just like chart positions in the Apple podcast charts. It's not going to do much for you other than have, bragging material. So it's really about, educating people on where the value is.
Right. Wonderful. And also, for people who want to go know, if you go over to the website, you can also again find the Podcasting Insights program. They podcast also, you were mentioning as the episode about, I didn't do it. I'm doing things wrong. You actually made the admission of it. Also see here the website, podmastery.co. If people are going to want to go and find episodes there. So either which way, finally, for those that are looking to go ahead and work with you, to go and book a chat with you, take another minute and just say why people need to go into podcasting and why they should go ahead and go to you at Podknows Podcasting. What will be the absolute reason? If you're on the fence as a company or as an individual, what's holding you back from doing podcasting? What should they hear from you that motivates them to go and do it right now?
I mean, there are more ears than ever before. We're in the millions now of people that not only have heard of podcasting now, more than half of the world has heard about a podcast, and a good third of the world is listening to them on a regular basis. It's that huge. So the opportunity for you to get your messaging out there, whatever that be, non-profit, commercial, enterprise, whatever you are, the opportunity for you to get new audience that you haven't been reaching before, because let's be honest about it, a blog is a third of your audience, video is a third of your audience, and audio is another third of your audience. So if you want to meet all three of those, you're going to need all three of those formats. And so podcasting, what it does is it not only gives you the audio, but if you do it cleverly, you get the video as well. So 2 birds with 1 stone killed straight away. And honestly, there's nothing better than having some member of the public email you and say, I listened to your podcast about insert topic here. Love the insights. How can I work with you? When you get that versus having to sit there and pay someone to send out 150 DMs for you and all that icky email outsourcing stuff that we meant, the outbound that we mentioned just a moment ago, it's just a much more enjoyable way of doing your lead gen, basically.
Yeah. So I'm here once again with the Podmaster, Neal Veglio, who runs Podknows Podcasting, also hosts of the Podcasting Insights podcast. And I appreciate all your knowledge and wisdom here and sharing all the wonderful stories with us. Thank you for being on. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you. Absolute pleasure being on, George. And I really appreciate what you're doing. And we need more people like you that are really spreading the truth about, not only the broadcasting industry and the podcasting industry, but the world of audio in general. There's a lot of nonsense out there. So the more evangelists we have, the better as far as I'm concerned. So thank you for making me a part of this.
Once again, a great interview with Neal Veglio here on the Broadcasters Podcast. Quick reminder, you can hear more of my interview with him on the Podcasters End on my Podcasters Row series. Look for that later this month, kingofpodcasts.com, and take a look for it. And until next time, remember that content is king and the control of your content is in your hands.